Hello and welcome back to Main Game, the video game show that's created by Malaysians for Malaysians and anyone else in the Southeast Asian region who wants to get into the wide world of gaming and esports. I'm your host Aoife.
And I'm Lewis Larkham from the esports guy over from the renowned video game publication site Kakuchopurei. We have a lovely full-set video game course for you today, featuring a spotlight on another prominent video game studio, keeping in theme with the Merdeka spirit of Malaysia.
And a segment on video game titles of 2023 that are using anime styles and aesthetics. Think of that as a follow-up from last week's cosplay feature. But first, let's talk about an important piece of the puzzle in video game creation. Okay, so Luis?
Yes, Aoife?
Games obviously cost money to make. How much usually, actually?
Quite a lot, actually, and I'm not talking about the shipping and distribution costs. Game studios need funding to hire the appropriate amount of people to create their dream projects. Either that or another game entry obligation from willing publishers. This can range from small indie company startups requiring 150,000 ringgit just for a satellite studio to get, or a decent chunk of $200 million budget for a AAA game.
Whoa, okay. Even if just for, an indie startup, the cost was quite expensive. But to sum it up, no local companies do get funding from government bodies in pursuit of Malaysian-made games and titles. Think of it like portfolio building for the country. Am I right, Luis?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay, so thank you so much, Luis. So for our first segment, we will be talking about, the government agency that helps build up digital businesses like video games companies, the Malaysian Digital Economy Corporation, or MDEC.
Aren't cheap to make. Video game companies also need a lot of capital to get going. Luckily, this particular Malaysian government agency makes sure that game companies and developers get the funding they need to jumpstart their dream project, provided your pitch was strong, of course. The group is called the Malaysian Digital Economy Corporation, MDEC for short. And for the past 27 years, they've been leading the development of the country's digital economy. This includes gaming and the games industry, of course. The agency helps aspiring Malaysian game developers by granting them funding, giving them networking opportunities, create mentorship programs, and more. MDEC's big boss, Mahathir Aziz, elaborates.
There's always requirements for new kinds of skill sets, new kinds of languages and tools that people will use in developing games. So we do look at talent development. We do find partners where these companies or these talents would need additional help. And this is where we link to the companies beyond Malaysian borders and also similar companies within Malaysia to be able to do that with like-minded, expertise and also objectives and goals as well. In terms of games, we have helped quite a few developers or developing companies in creative content. And specifically games. I think Gigabash is one of them. We have also helped more companies expanding and developing console games and also mobile games, whether it's PlayStation, Xbox, and also mobiles, both Android and also Apple platforms.
He also brings up how the Malaysian video game industry has evolved.
I think the aspect of creating games extends from designing, conceptualizing, developing, marketing and promotions of these games, and also for subcontracting of some bigger work from bigger studios as well. So MDEC supports all the value chain of the game development.
These games and companies include titles like Gigabash from Passion Republic, Simulacra from Kaigan Games, and Rhythm Doctor from 7th Beat Games.
Beyond that, like I said, the console games like PlayStation and Xbox would be the kinds of games that Malaysian companies have worked on as a subcontract to develop bigger games and also stages within the games as well.
There is an elephant in the room that needs addressing. Game developers thinking that bigger funding and more of it could solve game development problems. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Funding is always an issue regardless of which subsector that you're looking at. I think it's not the only answer to the whole issue, but there are other aspects of this. We can add a bit more funding, but there are other aspects in terms of skills and especially on the marketing, advertising and promotions of their products. So again, a bit more I think intervention that needs to be done in terms of the skill set that we need to develop and also develop together in the advent of artificial intelligence, changing the way the game development industry would be functioning moving forward as well. So again, funding is something that we do try to help. There are grants available in MDEC to be able to do that. There are facilitation services that we also do to help with the game development industry. But again, I think what is more important now is that with the advent of AI, where are they going with respect to that, and how would they be able to operate moving forward with the kind of resources that they have today.
To cap off this whole segment, MDEC talks about its public forum initiative called the Malaysian Digital Content Festival.
Malaysia Digital Content Festival is basically a combination of three events that we normally would have every year. That would be Level Up and also Creative. So this event basically combines quite a number of players, industry players, whether it's on animation and also on games development, and bringing in the kinds of audiences, whether they are funders, potential financiers, other studios that can collaborate with us, and also buyers of potential buyers of this kind of events that we have.
The Malaysia Digital Content Festival 2023 will be hosted at the Kuala Lumpur Convention Centre from 27th September to 1st October.
That was a great introspective look at MDEC. Now, I have a question about game company creating and developing, Luis. How would MDEC support young developers?
I mean, that's a good question. Well, according to Mahathir Aziz, MDEC offers game development incubation initiatives and K-12 levels programs like Creativity at School. MDEC also have a bunch of creative talent outreach programs involving higher education institutes, with some of them even being hosted in places like Sabah or Sarawak.
Okay, so I do have one more question. If parents have kids who wants to get into game development in Malaysia, what do they have to do?
For parents, well, they can encourage their kids to participate in game jams or attend game industry conventions with the appropriate academic and educational value like MDEC's MYDCF, as mentioned in Lowdown. The event is actually upcoming, as it was mentioned, and will be held at the Kuala Lumpur Convention Centre from the 27th of September to the 1st of October.
That's a very helpful advice, especially for our young viewers, tuning who wants to get into game making in Malaysia. A big thank you to MDEC for the exclusive interview. Just thinking about all that hard work and dedication to the craft is already making us a little tired. So let's take a commercial break and we'll be right back. We are back. Our next focus is about this next game developer got his big break from one of the biggest video game companies in the world, Square Enix, located in Tokyo, Japan. He then came to Malaysia, a hometown hero, and made his own video game company. Find out his full story here right now.
What if we told you that there was a Malaysian who worked on the Final Fantasy title? A game series that is revered by many gaming fans for its rich stories, lovely graphics, exciting gameplay, and breathtaking music? And that same Malaysian came back to his hometown and started his own game development company? Yes, dreams do indeed come true. Enter Juan Hasmer, founder of game studio Metronomik. But before that, he found his way into Square Enix while he was in Japan, eventually landing a lead game designer role for Final Fantasy titles.
At first, it was quite difficult because I just graduated from a Japanese language institute, but obviously I had no experience working in the game industry, let alone in the Japanese game industry. So it was difficult at first. I had to get used to working with colleagues, getting used to the flow of how the Japanese create their games. So something that I found out that I didn't know from the books that I bought in Kinokuniya was that the Japanese actually design games based on instinct rather than theories. So rather than writing a lot of planning, like write a lot of plans on the game design and all that, they will usually design based on instinct. Like for example, they create something, then they prototype it straight away, and then they would test it and say, nah, that's not right, and then they will go back to the drawing board, right? So I had to get used to that because I was so used to the theoretical aspect of game design, and I was a programmer as well. So I was a very technical person. When Final Fantasy 15 was launched, I think I cried. Yeah, it was so, I don't know, but I was so moved because you get to see people watching trailers and seeing their reaction and all that, but being able to see them actually react to their gameplay, to the gameplay of the game. And also the very fact that I worked on it since 2010 and it was released in 2016. So of course having that very long development time did put more tears in my eyes when it was launched.
After all is said and done, Juan Hasmer wanted to set out on his own when he returned to Malaysia. Thus, Metronomik was born in December 2017. And the game they set out to make? A rhythm action hybrid game called No Straight Roads, announced in late 2018.
To get the team together to make the game before the announcement was quite tricky at first because our company is very different than other companies because other companies usually they would hire more experienced people, whereas Metronomik is more open to new people. We actually welcome fresh ideas, so we were willing to hire people who were not even in the game industry or were not even studying game design whatsoever. But it was hard at first because no one knew about it, so they didn't know that they actually had a chance to work in the video game industry. So that education, that marketing took some time. And the other thing that we found quite difficult was to put in our Malaysian identity into the game. We had our voice actors speak in their natural accent. When they came to the audition, they automatically switched on their American accent. When we had their Malaysian accents in the game, the team felt kind of like it was quite cringy to them because they are not used to listening to their own accent in a substantial video game, right? So it took some time to convince them that it's okay to put your Malaysian identity into the game.
Despite these challenges, as well as COVID-19 that made everyone work from home, No Straight Roads came out in 25th August 2020.
At first, I couldn't believe that the game was out because we only took 2.5 years. I lost a lot of sleep that day. I was checking Twitter, checking Facebook, checking all the socials, and I was actually very, very surprised at the reception that we got. Positively surprised, actually. We see a lot of non-Malaysians actually responding to the game. From No Straight Roads launch, we actually worked on several things like updates to No Straight Roads, and then we created an encore edition for Steam as well. We wanted to thank the fans because we love our fans so much, so we put in their fan art in the game and actually tied gameplay to their fan art as well, where you can actually collect them from the streets and decorate your guitar case.
So what is the company planning for late 2023 and 2024 onward?
We're actually working on our second game called Onde Onde. We can't reveal much information about that yet, but yeah, we're still working on the game and the team is working very, very hard. Details to come.
And that was quite a look at Malaysian game studio Metronomik. So Louise, have you ever played No Straight Roots before?
Well, yes, I have, and I have to admit, it's a fun action game with rhythm mechanics, and featuring main characters Mayday and Zook as they rock out in Vinyl City dealing with music-themed bosses. There are a ton of musical styles being explored in the game's challenges, from EDM to classical to even rap.
Looks great actually, though I have to say it looks similar to a game we covered before a while, which is the Hi-Fi Rush.
Well, we have to put things into perspective. No Straight Roads came out in 2020 and is made from a small indie team, whereas Hi-Fi Rush came out this year and is made by Tango Gameworks, who already have 3 major game titles under their belt, with Evil Within, Evil Within 2, and Ghostwire Tokyo. I honestly feel that it's great having 2 amazing rhythm-based games, hybrids almost, that can exist in the same space for everyone to play. And one steeped in Malaysian culture and the other glorifying the 90s Saturday morning cartoon vibe.
Nicely put, Louise. So I might just play both of them when, I can find the time to actually play. And again, great job to Malaysia's own game company, Metronomik, for the fun performance that is No Straight Roots. That's one way to keep Malaysian pride going and putting the country on the map. Let's take 5 from our current jam session. We'll be right back after these commercials. And welcome back. I do feel like we're missing a block from last week's show, a segment that's tied to last week's cosplay showcase.
Yes, we did mention video game culture being integral to cosplay and anime, but what about video games themselves?
You mean video game based on anime series? Come on, Luis, you need to tell me more.
Honestly, it's not a novel concept. Think video game adaptations for movies, but switch out movies for anime. I believe the first game to be adapted from an anime license is Lupin III for arcade machines back in the 80s. The very first instance of a stealth game long before Metal Gear, which we will probably have to save for a future segment.
How about other notable tidbits about anime in video games?
Well, there are countless games based on anime. If we were to list down all of them here today, from One Piece to Dragon Ball Z, then we definitely need more than 13 episodes, that's for sure.
Speaking of One Piece, you are actually a fan of the series, am I right?
Yep.
What's your favorite game from the franchise?
Recency bias may play a little bit of a factor here, but I really do love One Piece Odyssey, which was released at the beginning of this year. Although I'm not too sure if I could recommend it to non-One Piece fans, as a lot of the enjoyment I found in the game is through re-experiencing some of my favorite arcs that the Straw Hats went on.
I can imagine that would be, put off since the anime's over thousands episodes now. But to wrap things up, we're going to talk about games and anime. Think of this as the companion to last week's cosplay and gaming feature. Take it away, Jonathan.
Anime has been prime and center of Malaysia's most cherished style of show to watch, from your Doraemons to your One Piece's shonen entries. When you combine it with games, well, you have a lot more anime fans entering the hobby. And of course, gamers tuning in to anime. And that's a lot to choose from, if we're being honest. Here are our top picks. The best example that's free come twofold from publisher Hoyoverse: Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. Genshin Impact is a real-time action role-playing game with open-world exploration set in a fantasy land, a 4-player party combat system filled with elemental powers aplenty, and lovely-looking characters to acquire through the game's free-to-play mechanic. Honkai Star Rail is a turn-based role-playing game with sci-fi trappings and aesthetics.
Nice.
A neat combat system filled with special powers and cutscenes galore, and lovely-looking characters to acquire and recruit through the game's free-to-play mechanic. Sensing a theme here? That's because Hoyoverse's biggest moneymakers involve making characters you might thirst for and start using real money to acquire, which is something we'll get into detail in a future episode or season. Moving on, for a more traditional approach to gaming, we have Guilty Gear Strive, which is a 2D fighting game available for major platforms, has an awesome visual style and banger-filled soundtrack, and a ton of fun characters to play as who are anime AF. A word of caution, the game's been out for 2 years now, so if you're planning on playing online with people, well, prepare to get salty. If you want a more current fighting game in the anime aesthetic and with the same free-flow controls like Guilty Gear, Idol Showdown lets you fight as VTubers against other VTubers. Everyone loves giant robots in anime, right? So let's round out this short feature with current robot game Nimbus Infinity. Nimbus Infinity has all the hallmarks of an anime story involving teens and robots. You come across a war mech by accident, you're automatically good at piloting it and using it for large-scale combat, and you talk to a bunch of handsome and pretty people to advance the plot. Fun! It's fast-paced and worth it for its less than usual price tag. And besides, as good as Armored Core 6 is, it ain't a cheap game. So if you're running low on funds, Nimbus Infinity will scratch that fast-paced mecha action itch. Thus concludes our anime gaming segment, at least for original games adopting the anime style and tropes. These titles are easy on the eyes, won't break your wallet, and they're still fun to play, even in 2023.
And that was a short but sweet recap of the most recent games using anime aesthetics. Original games, thank you so much, Jonathan. So to continue on from the previous conversation, I know Dragon Ball is a popular anime series, but Luis, are there any games based on the franchise that you like?
Well, my initial exposure to the anime was actually through Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2. The three-dimensional fighting mechanics had 8-year-old me obsessed, especially with the charging mechanic and being able to turn Super Saiyan mid-fight. The story mode is also almost one-to-one with the anime, and the game slots you right in as the fight scenes are about to start, which makes it feel as if you're playing the anime itself.
That sounds pretty cool, but you know, talking about the Dragon Ball Z, before the Dragon Ball Z was the Dragon Ball, and I remember back in the days, Dragon Ball was the in thing. Everyone loved it, especially the main character, which is Goku. Okay, that's my personal favorite. And you know, the fact that Goku is very funny, the storyline is very, very light and easy. Everyone loved it, but it kind of like reminds me of Journey to the West, something very similar. But do you agree with me if I say that, you know, Dragon Ball changed or moved to a different kind of genre, which is more of a sci-fi over-the-top kind of anime?
Definitely, I do think it did quite a bit, yeah. I think nowadays it's definitely a little bit more sci-fi.
Okay, so you know, we were talking about Dragon Ball, and my personal was Goku. How about you?
Probably Goku as well. I was a big fan of that. Yeah, big fan of Goku as well.
Okay, so how about the Cyberpunk Edge Runners?
I mean, that brings us to our next topic, which is my personal favorite anime adaptation from a game turned into an anime, which was, by Studio Trigger, Cyberpunk Edge Runners. For me, Cyberpunk Edge Runners perfectly encapsulates Night City, the city in which Cyberpunk 2077, the game, actually takes place in. Aesthetically, I actually think that the anime captures more of the beauty of Night City than the game itself, as something about the anime's art style definitely captures the futuristic cyberpunky vibe. They also did a fantastic job with the English dub, which is quite hard to come by, incorporating many of the slang that is used by the creators of the game. And obviously, how could I forget about the phenomenal soundtrack? The game already had bangers to begin with, but the anime just tops it up by 100%. And for that, I thoroughly believe that Cyberpunk Edge Runners is Studio Trigger's best work since Little Witch Academia.
Those are, you know, actually some bold words, Luis. And what better way to end the episode than with some colorful subject matters? I hope you've enjoyed this week's offering of Malaysia's finest in game making and grant funding. We will have more history lessons and deep dives coming in the next few weeks. Until then, I'm your host Ifa.
And I'm Lewis from Kakuchopurei.
Selamat menyambut Bulan Merdeka, and to our hard-working game developers, artists, coders, publishers, marketeers and QA team from Malaysia, we thank you so much. Goodbye.